The perfect evening. Maya Rodriguez adjusted the delicate silver bracelet on her wrist as she gazed across the candlelit table at her husband. The soft glow from the flickering flames cast dancing shadows across David's face, highlighting the smile lines that had drawn her to him nearly a decade ago. Rossini's, their favorite Italian restaurant, hummed with quiet conversation and the gentle clink of wine glasses. The same intimate atmosphere that had captivated them during their first date here, as young professionals with dreams bigger than their bank accounts. "I can't believe it's been 8 years, Maya said, taking a sip of the Chianti David had ordered, the same vintage they'd shared on their wedding night. She noted with a mixture of nostalgia and something she couldn't quite name. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday, and other times ... Like a lifetime," David finished, reaching across the white tablecloth to cover her hand with his. His wedding ring caught the light, a simple gold band that matched hers perfectly. "A good lifetime, right?" Maya nodded, though she noticed how his eyes seemed to drift toward his phone, which lay face down beside his pasta. It was a habit that had become more pronounced over the past few months, the constant checking, the mysterious calls he'd step away to take, the late nights at the office that had become the norm rather than the exception. She'd attributed it to the stress of his promotion to marketing director at Henderson & Associates, but tonight she pushed those concerns aside. It was her birthday, after all. "Remember when we used to come here every Friday night?" Maya asked, twirling her linguine around her fork. "Back when we could barely afford the appetizers?" David laughed, and for a moment, the sound was genuine and warm. "You'd order the same thing every time, mushroom risotto, and I'd pretend I wasn't calculating the tip in my head to make sure we had enough. Now look at us." Maya gestured around the restaurant, taking in the expensive wine, the premium dishes, the ease with which David had reserved the best table in the house. Her architectural firm had taken off beyond her wildest expectations, and David's career had flourished alongside hers. They'd built a beautiful life together in their craftsman home in the hills, complete with the garden she'd always dreamed of, and the home office where she sketched her designs. Yet lately, something felt different. David seemed distracted, distant, in ways that had nothing to do with work stress. Their conversations had become surface level, their intimacy sporadic. Maya had dismissed these concerns as the natural evolution of a long marriage, the comfortable settling that all her married friends described. But sitting here now, watching David glance at his phone again, she felt a familiar knot of unease in her stomach. "I have something for you," David said suddenly, reaching into his jacket pocket. He produced a small velvet box, and Maya's breath caught inside was a delicate necklace, with a pendant shaped like a compass, a thoughtful nod to her love of travel and adventure. "David, it's beautiful," she whispered, genuinely touched. He moved behind her chair to fasten it around her neck, his fingers gentle against her skin. For a moment, she felt silly for her earlier doubts. This was the man who remembered her favorite flower, who supported her career ambitions, who had stood by her through her father's illness 2 years ago. "Happy birthday, Maya," he murmured against her ear before returning to his seat. She fingered the compass pendant, feeling its cool weight against her collarbone. "Thank you for this, for tonight, for everything." David smiled, but she noticed it didn't quite reach his eyes. His phone buzzed against the table, and though he didn't pick it up, Maya saw his gaze flick toward it involuntarily. "Go ahead," she said with a slight laugh. "Check it." "No, you're dying too." "Oh, no," David protested, but his hand was already moving toward the device. "It's probably just work. You know how Peterson gets about the Morrison account?" Maya nodded, understanding, though something cold settled in her chest as she watched her husband's face change while he read whatever message had arrived. His expression shifted from casual interest to something she couldn't quite identify: guilt, perhaps, or fear. He set the phone back down quickly, screen side down. "Nothing important," he said, but his voice carried a tension that hadn't been there moments before. Maya smiled and raised her wine glass. "To another year," she said, though the words felt strange on her tongue. "To another year," David echoed, clinking his glass against hers. Neither of them noticed the phone buzzing silently against the table, or the message preview that briefly illuminated the screen before fading back to black. The accidental revelation the evening had settled into a comfortable rhythm when David's phone rang, cutting through their quiet conversation about Maya's latest project, sustainable housing development, that had her more excited than she'd been about work in months. David glanced at the caller ID, and Maya caught the brief flash of something across his face before he answered. "Peterson, hey," David said, his voice taking on that professional tone Maya knew so well. "I know it's late," but he paused. Listening, then stood abruptly. "Let me step outside so I don't disturb the other diners. Give me just a minute." Maya watched him weave between tables, toward the restaurant's entrance, phone pressed to his ear. She'd grown accustomed to these interruptions over the years, though they seemed to happen more frequently lately. David's dedication to his job was one of the things she'd always admired about him. Even when it meant cut short dinners and weekend calls, she was reaching for her wine glass when David's personal phone, still lying on the table, lit up with an incoming text message. The preview appeared clearly on the lock screen, and Maya's hand froze halfway to her glass. "Missing you tonight. Can't wait for our weekend getaway." Sophie Maya stared at the message, her mind struggling to process the words. Walsh, she knew that name, David's colleague in the marketing department, one he'd mentioned casually over the past few months. Young, ambitious, recently hired from a competitor firm. Maya had even met her briefly at the company holiday party. A petite blonde with an infectious laugh, who'd complimented Maya's dress and seemed genuinely sweet. The phone screen dimmed, then went dark, but the words remained burned in Maya's vision. Weekend getaway. The heart emoji. It's the intimacy in those 4 simple words that spoke of plans made in secret, of a relationship that extended far beyond office collaboration. With trembling fingers, Maya picked up the phone. She knew David's passcode, their wedding anniversary, something they'd shared openly throughout their marriage. Oh, her thumb hesitated over the screen. Part of her wanted to set the phone down, to pretend she'd never seen the message, to return to the blissful ignorance she'd possessed just moments ago. Instead, she unlocked the screen. The text thread with Sophie stretched back months. Maya scrolled upward with growing horror, watching her marriage disintegrate in real time through casual messages that spoke of lunch dates, late-night conversations, and stolen moments. "Thinking of you during the board meeting," read one from Sophie. "Last night was incredible." David had responded to another. "I wish things were different," Sophie had written just last week. Maya's hands shook as she continued reading. There were references to hotels, to cover stories David had apparently told her about working late, to the guilt he felt but couldn't seem to overcome. One message from David particularly cut deep. "Maya suspects something, I think. She asked why I've been so distracted lately. I told her it was work stress." She had asked him that just 3 weeks ago, lying in bed after another evening where he'd seemed a million miles away despite sitting right beside her. She'd been worried about him, concerned that he was pushing himself too hard at work, wondering if there was something she could do to help ease his burden. The restaurant's ambient noise faded to a dull roar as Maya continued scrolling. There were photos, nothing explicit, but intimate enough. Sophie at a coffee shop, smiling at the camera with the caption, "Wish you were here." David's hand holding Sophie's across a table Maya didn't recognize. A selfie of them together, Sophie's head on David's shoulder. Both looking happier than Maya had seen David look in months. Her throat constricted as she reached more recent messages. Plans for this weekend: a trip to Napa Valley, to a bed and breakfast. Maya had actually suggested they visit for their anniversary next month. David had dismissed the idea then, claiming he was too busy with work. Apparently, he wasn't too busy for Sophie. The most recent exchange, from just this afternoon, made Maya's blood run cold. "Sophie, I know tonight is hard for you. Wish I could be there instead of her." "David, me too. Just have to get through dinner, and then I can call you." "Sophie, I love you." "David, I love you too, more than I should." Maya set the phone down carefully, her hands surprisingly steady despite the earthquake happening inside her chest. She looked around the restaurant, at the other couples sharing intimate dinners, at the servers moving gracefully between tables, at the normal world continuing to spin while hers had just shattered completely through the window. She could see David pacing on the sidewalk, still on his call. His free hand gestured animatedly as he spoke, and Maya wondered if he was actually talking to Peterson at all, or if this was just another lie in what appeared to be an elaborate web of deception. The irony wasn't lost on her. Here she sat, wearing the compass necklace he'd given her just an hour ago, symbol of navigation and direction, while discovering that her husband had been navigating towards someone else entirely. The pendant felt heavy against her throat now, almost suffocating. Maya reached for her wine glass with steady hands and took a long sip, tasting nothing. She'd spent the first part of the evening grateful for her stable marriage, dismissing her recent concerns as paranoia.
Oh.
Now she understood that her instincts had been trying to tell her something her heart hadn't wanted to hear. David was walking back toward the restaurant, sliding his phone into his pocket, preparing to return to their table with whatever lie he'd crafted to explain the interruption. Maya watched him approach through the window. This man she'd loved for nearly a decade, and realized she was seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time in months. When he sat back down, smiling apologetically, Maya was ready for him. "How's Peterson?" she asked calmly, David's phone lying innocuously beside her water glass. "Oh, you know how he is," David replied, settling into his chair. "Crisis of the day. Nothing that can't wait until Monday, really." Maya nodded, watching her husband lie to her face, while his phone held the evidence of his betrayal just inches from his reach. "I'm glad you could resolve it quickly," she said. "I'd hate for work to ruin our evening." "Nothing could ruin tonight," David said, reaching for her hand again. "This is perfect. You're perfect." Maya squeezed his fingers gently, marveling at how easily deception could masquerade as affection. She was beginning to understand that nothing about this evening, or perhaps their entire recent history, had been what it seemed. The confrontation, Maya continued to hold David's hand across the table, feeling the familiar warmth of his palm against hers while her mind raced through the implications of what she'd discovered. The compass necklace felt like a weight around her throat, a cruel joke about finding direction when she'd just learned how completely lost she'd been. "David," she said quietly, her voice surprisingly steady, "we need to talk." Something in her tone must have alerted him, because his smile faltered slightly. "Of course. What's on your mind?" Maya gently extracted her hand from his and picked up his phone, placing it deliberately in the center of the table between them. David's eyes immediately locked onto the device, and she watched the color drain from his face as understanding dawned. "I saw the message from Sophie," Maya said simply, "and then I saw all the other messages." The transformation in David's expression was immediate and devastating. His mouth opened, then closed, no sound emerging. His hands, which had been resting casually on the table, began to tremble slightly. Maya had never seen him look so completely stripped of his usual confidence, so utterly exposed. "Maya, I can explain," he finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's not what you think." "What do I think, David?" Maya asked, leaning back in her chair. She felt strangely calm, as if she were watching the scene unfold from outside herself. "Tell me what I think." He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture she'd seen him make 1,000 times when he was stressed, but never quite like this. "It's complicated, is it?" Maya's voice remained level, controlled, because it seems fairly straightforward to me. "You've been having an affair?" "With Sophie Walsh for months. You've been lying to me about working late, about business trips, about why you've been so distant. And you're planning to spend this weekend with her in Napa Valley." Each word landed like a physical blow. David flinched visibly, his composure crumbling in real time. Around them, the restaurant continued its gentle hum of conversation and clinking silverware, oblivious to the marriage dissolving at table 12. "How long?" Maya asked, when David remained silent. "Maya, please, let me." "How long, David?" He closed his eyes tightly, as if the darkness might offer him escape. "For months. 4 months." Maya did the quick calculation. It had started around the time David received his promotion, when he'd been so happy, so energized about his new role. She'd attributed his increased enthusiasm to career satisfaction, never imagining it might have another source entirely. "Do you love her?" The question surprised even Maya. She hadn't planned to ask it. but it seemed important somehow to understand the depth of his betrayal. David's eyes snapped open, panic flooding his features. Maya, don't ask me that. I'm asking. The silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. Finally, David's shoulders sagged in defeat. I think so. Yes. The admission hit Maya like a physical blow, even though she'd read the evidence in his messages. Hearing him say it aloud, watching him confirm that this wasn't just physical attraction or a midlife crisis, but actual love, somehow made it more real, more final. But I love you too, David rushed to add, reaching across the table for her hands. Maya pulled them back, placing them safely in her lap. I never meant for this to happen. It started so innocently. Sophie was new. She needed mentoring, and we began having coffee meetings that turned into lunch meetings, and then you decided to have an affair, Maya finished. It wasn't a decision, David protested, his voice taking on a desperate edge. It just happened. These feelings, they caught me completely off guard. I kept trying to end it, but when? Maya interrupted. When did you try to end it? David's mouth opened, then closed. Maya could see him rifling through his memory, searching for a time when he'd actually attempted to break things off with Sophie rather than simply feeling guilty about continuing them. You never tried to end it, Maya said, answering her own question. You just felt bad about it while actively choosing to continue. Maya, please. Tears were forming in David's eyes now, and his voice cracked with emotion. I know I've made terrible mistakes, but we can work through this. I'll end things with Sophie immediately. I'll do whatever it takes to save our marriage. Maya studied her husband's face, taking in the tears, the desperation, the genuine anguish. Part of her, the part that had loved him for nearly a decade, wanted to believe him, wanted to think that they could somehow rebuild from this wreckage, that his remorse was enough to bridge the chasm his choices had created. But another part of her, a stronger part she didn't know she possessed, recognized something crucial. David wasn't sorry he'd had the affair. He was sorry he'd been caught. You told Sophie you wished you were with her tonight, instead of me, Maya said quietly. At my birthday dinner. You told the woman you're in love with that you wished she was here instead of your wife. David's face crumpled. I was confused. I didn't mean you meant it, Maya said with certainty. You know what? I believe you. I think you would rather be with Sophie tonight. I think you've been wanting to be with Sophie for months instead of dealing with the complications of your actual life. That's not true, David said weakly. But even he seemed to recognize the lack of conviction in his own voice. Maya reached for her wine glass and took a slow sip, using the time to gather her thoughts. When she spoke again, her voice was steady and clear. I need you to understand something, David. This isn't just about the affair. It's about the months of lies, the gaslighting, the way you made me question my own instincts when I sensed something was wrong. It's about you sitting here tonight. It's giving me a necklace and telling me I'm perfect, while planning to spend the weekend with another woman. David was crying openly now, drawing curious glances from nearby diners. Maya felt a strange detachment from his tears, as if they belonged to someone else's story. I can change, he whispered. I know I can. Just give me a chance to prove it. Maya set down her wine glass and looked directly into her husband's eyes. The thing is, David, I don't think I want you to change. I think I want you to be exactly who you are, just not with me. The finality in her voice seemed to hit David like a physical blow. He leaned back in his chair, staring at her with something approaching shock. You're leaving me, he said. Not quite a question. Maya fingered the compass pendant at her throat, feeling its weight differently now. Maybe it wasn't a cruel joke after all. Maybe it was exactly what she needed, a tool for finding her way forward. Yes, she said simply. I am. The hidden truth, David's face went through a series of expression shock. Denial, desperate calculation, as if he were trying to solve an equation that would somehow undo everything that had just happened. He leaned forward, his voice taking on the persuasive tone Maya had heard him use countless times in business meetings. Maya, you can't just throw away 8 years of marriage over one mistake. We have a life together, a home, plans for the future. You're not thinking clearly right now. You're hurt and angry, which is completely understandable. But David... Maya's voice cut through his words with quiet authority. Stop. Something in her tone made him pause mid-sentence. into her purse and pulled out a manila envelope, placing it on the table next to his phone. David stared at it as if it might explode. "What is that?" he asked, though his voice suggested he already suspected the answer wouldn't be good. "Evidence," Maya said simply. "Photographs, financial records, hotel receipts, credit card statements. 3 weeks' worth of professional surveillance documenting your affair with Sophie Walsh." The blood drained from David's face so quickly, Maya worried he might faint. His hands gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white with strain. "You hired a private investigator?" His voice was barely audible. "Lena Vasquez, one of the best in the city. I contacted her the day after you told me you had to work late on our anniversary, the night you were actually at the Fairmont with Sophie." Maya's tone remained conversational, almost casual. "Alina was very thorough. We have photos of you two at restaurants, holding hands in hotel lobbies, kissing in parking garages. We have credit card records showing charges to lingerie stores. On days you claimed to be in budget meetings." David's mouth moved soundlessly like a fish gasping for air. Maya continued, her voice never wavering from its calm, matter-of-fact tone. "We also have the hotel registration for this weekend's trip to Napa Valley. The Auberge du Soleil, isn't it? The same place I suggested for our anniversary, which you said was too expensive. Apparently it's not too expensive for Sophie." Maya. When did you? David couldn't seem to form a complete sentence. 3 weeks ago, Maya repeated. "The night you came home at 2 a.m. with lipstick on your collar that wasn't my shade?" "You said you'd spilled wine at a client dinner. I'd done your laundry for 8 years, David. I know what wine stains look like, and I know what lipstick looks like." She opened the envelope and slid out a photograph, placing it face up on the table. It showed David and Sophie emerging from an elevator at the downtown Marriott, David's hand resting possessively on the small of Sophie's back. Both of them laughing at something one of them had said. "This was taken last Tuesday," Maya said. "The day you told me you had a late meeting with the Henderson team?" David stared at the photograph, his breathing becoming shallow and rapid. "Maya, you don't understand. I was going to tell you. I was trying to figure out how to know you weren't." Maya's interruption was gentle but firm. "You were trying to figure out how to manage both relationships without losing either one?" Elena's notes include overheard phone conversations where, "You told Sophie you couldn't leave me because of the financial complications. Apparently my architectural firm's success makes divorce expensive for you." The accusation hung in the air like a toxic cloud. David's face cycled through several emotions before settling on something that looked like genuine shame. "That's not, yes, I said that, but it's not why I stayed. I stayed because I love you. You stayed because you love my money," Maya corrected. "And because you're a coward who wanted to have his cake and eat it too." She pulled out another document from the envelope, a thick legal packet, bound with a blue backing. "Divorce papers," she said in response to David's questioning look. "Filed this morning. You'll be served officially on Monday, but I thought you should know tonight." David's hands trembled as he reached for the papers, scanning the first page. With growing horror, "Maya, please don't do this. We can go to counseling. We can work through this." "We could have worked through this 3 weeks ago when I gave you the opportunity," Maya said. "I asked you directly if there was something you needed to tell me. I said I felt like you were hiding something and that whatever it was, we could face it together. Do you remember what you said?" David's silence was answer enough. Looked me in the eye and told me I was being paranoid. "You said work stress was making me imagine problems that didn't exist. You made me question my own instincts, my own sanity, while you continued sleeping with Sophie and planning weekend getaways." Maya leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "If you had told me the truth that night, if you had admitted the affair and asked for forgiveness, I might have considered trying to save our marriage, but you didn't. You chose to lie, to gaslight me, to make me feel crazy for sensing what was actually happening." "I was scared," David said weakly. "I didn't know how to tell you. You were selfish," Maya corrected. "You wanted to keep both of us without having to face any consequences. And you might have succeeded if you hadn't made one crucial mistake." David looked up at her with red-rimmed eyes. "What mistake?" Maya smiled for the first time all evening, though there was no warmth in it. "You underestimated your wife?" She stood up from the table, leaving the divorce papers and the envelope of evidence in front of David. The other diners had mostly finished their meals. and the restaurant was beginning to empty. But their drama continued in its bubble of devastation. "House is in my name," Maya said, pulling on her coat. "So is the car you drove here tonight? Lena's investigation revealed that you've been using our joint account to pay for your hotel rooms and gifts for Sophie. So I've already moved my money to a separate account and closed our joint credit cards." David stared up at her in complete shock. "You can't just—" "I can, and I have. My attorney has been very helpful in explaining exactly what I can and cannot do." Maya slung her purse over her shoulder. "You'll find your belongings packed and waiting in the garage. I had them moved there this afternoon." "Where am I supposed to go?" David's voice cracked with panic. "I'm sure Sophie would be happy to have you," Maya said. "After all, isn't that what you both wanted?" She pulled a $20 bill from her wallet and placed it on the table next to her untouched dessert. "Happy birthday to me," she said softly, echoing the words she'd spoken to herself in the bathroom mirror. That morning, while getting ready for what she'd known would be the last birthday dinner of her marriage, as she walked toward the restaurant's exit, Maya could hear David calling her name, his voice thick with tears and desperation. But didn't turn around. She'd heard enough of his voice for one lifetime. The compass pendant bounced gently against her chest as she walked. And for the first time all evening, Maya felt like she was heading in the right direction. The new beginning. Maya sat in her car outside the restaurant for several minutes, her hands gripping the steering wheel as the adrenaline slowly drained from her system. Through the window, she could see David still at their table, his head in his hands. The divorce papers scattered around him like the remnants of their shattered marriage. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister Carmen. "How's the birthday dinner? David better be treating you like a queen." Maya almost laughed at the irony. Instead, she typed back, "It's over. I'm coming to your place." Carmen's response was immediate. "What's over?"
"Oh,
"Everything. I'll explain when I get there," Maya started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot, deliberately not looking back at the restaurant. The drive to Carmen's house in the suburbs gave her time to process what had just happened. 3 weeks of careful planning had culminated in this moment, the controlled demolition of her marriage on her own terms. Carmen was waiting on her porch when Maya arrived, still in her pajamas despite the early hour. She took one look at Maya's face and pulled her into a fierce hug. "The spare room's ready," Carmen said simply. "It has been for weeks." That night, Maya lay in her sister's guest bed, staring at the ceiling and fingering the compass necklace she couldn't bring herself to remove. Tomorrow would bring practical concerns, finalizing the divorce, dealing with mutual friends, dividing their social circle. But tonight, for the first time in months, she felt something she'd almost forgotten: peace. Her phone buzzed with messages from David, dozens of them, alternating between desperate apologies and angry accusations. Maya read the first few, then blocked his number. Lena had prepared her for this phase too. The investigation had been thorough, but so had the psychological preparation. 6 months later, Maya stood in the empty lot where her new architectural firm's headquarters would be built. Rodriguez Design Studio was already booking clients faster than she could handle. Her reputation for sustainable architecture, having flourished once she'd stopped trying to balance her career with David's emotional needs. "It's going to be beautiful," said James Morrison, her business partner and former colleague who'd approached her about starting their own firm. It's just 2 weeks after her divorce was finalized. "Are you sure about the rooftop garden?" "Absolutely," Maya said, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "I want something alive up there, something that grows." Her phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. A moment. Her heart rate spiked. David had tried to contact her through various means over the past few months, but the message was from Alina Vasquez. "Saw the article about your new firm in the Business Journal? Congratulations. You're an inspiration to every woman who's ever trusted her instincts." Maya smiled, tucking the phone back into her pocket. She'd kept the compass necklace, though she'd had it reset with a different chain. It served as a reminder now of David's deception, but of her own ability to navigate toward truth. Even when the path was painful, the lot was quiet except for the distant sound of traffic and the whisper of wind through the oak trees. She'd insisted on preserving in the building design. Maya closed her eyes and breathed deeply, tasting freedom in the evening air. Her marriage to David had ended on her 35th birthday. But her real life, the one where she stopped compromising herself for someone else's comfort, had begun that same night. The text message that was supposed to go to Sophie had found its way to exactly the right woman after all. Maya opened her eyes and looked toward the future she was building, one honest decision at a time. The sun had set completely now, but she wasn't afraid of the darkness. She'd learned to trust her own sense of direction. For the first time in years, Maya Rodriguez knew exactly where she was going.